October 1945, San Francisco Harbor. 73 Japanese women stood on the deck of the military transport ship, their gray uniforms stiff with months of accumulated sweat and grime.
We have to get
The
out of
fabric
here!
had transformed
Hurry,
into something
before it's too
closer to
late!
cardboard,
Help us!
than cloth crusted with salt from ocean spray and the residue of bodies that hadn't been properly washed since their capture. They ranged in age from 19 to 31. Most were in their early 20s. They'd served as Luftnachrichtenhelferinnen, the awkward German-Japanese designation for female auxiliary communications personnel. Radio operators who transmitted coordinates that sent fighters into combat. Telephone switchboard workers who'd connected commanders during battles. Radar technicians who tracked incoming bombers across Pacific skies. Their faces were hollow skin stretched tight over cheekbones that protruded sharply. Hair hung in greasy tangles beneath caps stripped of all insignia. The rising sun emblem had been removed. The unit designations cut away. Just gray cloth remained, anonymous, defeated, reduced to nothing but bodies waiting to discover their fate. They hadn't eaten properly since March. 7 months of Germany's final collapse mirrored in Japan's Pacific territories. 7 months of rations that shrank from inadequate to non-existent. The last real meal had been 4 days ago, thin soup that tasted like boiled seaweed and a rice ball so small it barely filled a palm. They knew the stories, had heard whispers in the cramped holds during the 3-week voyage across the Pacific. What Americans did to capture Japanese women, especially those who'd worn uniforms, especially those who'd served the military that had bombed Pearl Harbor, tortured Allied prisoners, committed atrocities across Asia. The stories were designed to make death preferable to capture. Better to die than endure what the Americans would inflict. So they waited, silent, obedient, because that's what Japanese women had been trained to do since childhood. Wait for authority to decide their fate, accept whatever came without protest. But the Americans standing on the dock below weren't shouting, weren't jeering, weren't displaying the visceral hatred the women had been taught to expect from devils without souls. They just stood there. Young men in crisp naval uniforms, faces tanned and healthy, eyes following the prisoners with expressions that were impossible to read. Sachiko Yamada stood in the front row, 22 years old, from Osaka. She'd been a nurse before conscription, working in a civilian hospital. In 1943, the military had begun drafting women for auxiliary roles, and Sachiko had been assigned to a field hospital on Saipan. She'd amputated limbs with inadequate anesthesia, watched young soldiers die from infections she had no medicine to treat, worked 20-hour shifts in tents that flooded when it rained and baked when the sun came out. When American forces overran Saipan, she'd been captured along with 12 other medical personnel, had expected immediate execution. Instead, she'd been processed like a prisoner of war, fingerprinted, photographed, assigned a number, and shipped to a holding facility in Guam before this transport to the American mainland. She still didn't understand why she was alive. Her hair crawled with lice. The constant itching had become background sensation, as omnipresent as her own heartbeat. Scratching only made it worse, opening small wounds that could become infected. So she'd learned to endure the crawling feeling across her scalp, the maddening itch at the base of her neck. The smell of unwashed bodies filled the spaces between prisoners. Sharp tang of old sweat mixed with mustiness of clothes that hadn't been properly cleaned in 7 months. Sachiko had grown accustomed to it, her senses adapting until it became invisible. But occasionally when the wind shifted, she'd catch a whiff of herself and feel shame so acute it was physical. She'd been raised to value cleanliness. Japanese culture emphasized ritual bathing, the importance of being clean before entering public spaces. Now she stood here filthy and degraded, smelling like an animal, reduced to something barely recognizable as the person she'd been before the war. Beside her, Fumiko Tanaka maintained rigid posture despite exhaustion. 29 years old, the oldest in the group, a former school teacher from Tokyo who'd been drafted to work communications at a naval base in the Philippines. She'd type reports and file paperwork and listen to radio chatter that had grown increasingly desperate as American forces closed in. Fumiko had 2 sons, 6 and 8 years old when she'd left them with her mother in 1943. She hadn't seen them in 2 years, hadn't received mail from Tokyo in 8 months. The city had been firebombed. She had no idea if her mother and children were alive. The not knowing was worse than certain death. The gangway descended, metal clanging against the dock with finality that made several women flinch. This was it. The moment when American cruelty would begin, when the facade of proper prisoner processing would drop and the real punishment would commence. But the sailor directing them down the gangway simply gestured, made no move to shove or strike, just pointed and waited patiently while 73 weak, frightened women shuffled forward on legs unsteady from weeks at sea. Sachiko descended carefully. Each step felt uncertain. The solid ground beneath her feet seemed strange after so long on shifting decks. She kept her eyes cast downward, afraid to meet American gazes, terrified of what she might see there. The other women followed, moving slowly, some clutching small bags containing their only possessions. A photograph, a letter, some personal item they'd managed to keep through chaos of capture and transport. Others had nothing, just the clothes they wore and the bodies they inhabited. American sailors lined the route from ship to waiting buses. Young men who watched the prisoners pass with expressions that Sachiko couldn't interpret. Some seemed curious, others uncomfortable. A few looked away entirely as if unable to witness enemy women in such reduced circumstances. But there was no violence, no shouting, no hatred made visible. Just awkward silence as captor and captured occupied the same space and tried to understand what that meant. Olive green buses waited, military vehicles with windows and seats and something that looked almost like civilian transport. Military police, both men and women, directed prisoners toward the doors. The women climbed aboard slowly. Sachiko chose a seat near the back, pressed her face to the window as the bus pulled away from the waterfront engine rumbling beneath them. San Francisco unfolded outside like something from a dream, a city untouched by war. Buildings intact and gleaming white in afternoon sun, skyscrapers reaching toward clouds, bridges spanning the bay in graceful arcs of steel and cable. Sachiko stared in disbelief. Tokyo was rubble and ash. Osaka had burned until the canals boiled. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were gone, erased by weapons beyond comprehension. But here stood America, whole, thriving, prosperous, as if war had happened on another planet entirely. The bus rolled through streets lined with grocery stores. Windows displayed food in abundance that made Sachiko gasp audibly. Pyramids of oranges, shelves of canned goods stacked floor to ceiling, hanging meat visible through glass, signs advertising prices that seemed affordable to ordinary people. Children rode bicycles down streets with no bomb craters, wore warm coats, moved with careless confidence of children who'd never known hunger or fear. Women walked freely in bright dresses, reds and blues and yellows that seemed garish to eyes accustomed to gray and brown. They carried shopping bags, laughed with each other, stopped to chat on street corners. There was no rubble anywhere, no burned-out buildings, no desperate crowds fighting for rations, no signs of privation or suffering. The contrast was so complete, so overwhelming, that Sachiko wondered if this was real or some elaborate trick. Perhaps a movie set designed to demoralize them. Perhaps behind these perfect streets lay the same ruin that existed everywhere else. But the bus kept moving. Block after block of intact buildings, functioning businesses, people living normal lives. America was whole. While Japan lay in ruins, while families picked through rubble for scraps, while children starved in streets, America looked like war had been an inconvenience rather than an existential catastrophe. How had Japan ever thought it could win? The bus finally stopped at a military facility outside the city. Guard towers stood at corners. Fences surrounded a compound of white wooden buildings. American flags snapped in wind, stars and stripes representing everything they'd been taught to hate. The gates opened. The buses rolled through with a hiss of air brakes. This would be home now. For however long the Americans decided. Days, weeks, months, years. No one knew. No one could say. The women were led into a large processing building. Interior was clinical, floors polished to shine, walls painted white. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Inside, American nurses in crisp white uniforms waited with clipboards, hair pinned neatly under caps, shoes polished and clean. The sight confused Sachiko immediately. Why would medical personnel be here for prisoner processing? What did this mean? Were they going to be experimented on? She'd heard rumors about medical experiments, whispers about things done in camps. Horrors inflicted in the name of science. Or were they going to be examined for humiliation? Stripped naked and photographed as examples of defeated enemy, the possibilities ran through her mind like poison. One by one names were recorded, characters carefully written in English transliteration, height and weight measured, basic medical checks performed by nurses who wore gloves and used clean instruments, temperature taken with glass thermometers sterilized between patients, blood pressure measured with cuffs wrapped carefully around thin arms, eyes examined with small flashlights, throats checked with wooden depressors. The American nurses worked efficiently but not unkindly. Spoken English, the prisoners mostly couldn't understand, but the tone was professional, almost gentle, voices soft, movements careful. No one was struck, no one was violated, no one was mocked or humiliated. The examination was clinical, respectful, bewildering in its normality. When Sachiko's name was called, she stepped forward with dread coiling in her stomach. This was where cruelty would begin. Had to be. But the nurse simply took her temperature, checked her blood pressure, looked in her throat and ears, made notes on a form, and gestured toward the next station. That was all. No degradation, no violation, just routine medical screening. Sachiko returned to the waiting area confused and off balance, unable to articulate what had just happened because it was so far from expectation. Then came the instruction that stopped everyone cold. Through a translator, a Japanese-American woman named Dr. Helen Yamamoto, who spoke with a California accent, they were told to proceed to the bathing facility. The words hit like physical blows. This was it. This was where the cruelty would begin. Sachiko had heard stories about what happened to women prisoners in bathing facilities. Whispered warnings about violation disguised as hygiene, about American soldiers watching and laughing, and worse. Her heart raced as they were led down a corridor toward large double doors. The corridor was long, painted pale green, lit by fluorescent lights that hummed softly. Their footsteps echoed on linoleum floor. Some women held hands seeking comfort. Others walked alone, wrapped in private fears. At the end of the corridor, the doors loomed large and white, impenetrable. An American officer, Major Elizabeth Garrett in her 40s with graying brown hair and kind eyes, reached for the door handle. The moment stretched eternal. Then the doors opened outwards, warm air rushed out like a breath, and with it came a smell that stopped the prisoners in their tracks. The smell hit first, soap and steam and something floral Sachiko couldn't immediately identify. Lavender mixed with other herbs, a clean scent almost forgotten after months of unwashed bodies and stale air. The room beyond was tiled in white, floor to ceiling, gleaming in light from bright electric bulbs hanging in protective cages. The tiles reflected light until the entire space seemed to glow. Along one wall stood a row of individual shower stalls, more than 20, each with chrome fixtures that caught the light. Along another wall were bathtubs, deep porcelain tubs with claw feet, already filling with water from chrome taps. Steam rising in clouds, fogging mirrors along a third wall. The room was heated, comfortably warm, the first truly warm place many of the women had been in months. They froze in the doorway, bodies rigid, unable to process what they were seeing. This couldn't be real, couldn't be for them. For 7 months, they'd washed with cold water from buckets when they washed at all, splashing themselves as clean as possible. Never enough water, never warm. They'd grown accustomed to constant itch of lice, learned to endure greasy weight of unwashed hair, accepted the smell of their own bodies as just another background misery. And now here were bathtubs, actual bathtubs, with hot water steaming. Here were showers with multiple spray heads and chrome fixtures that looked brand new. Here were stacks of white towels, fluffy and clean, folded neatly on wooden benches. Here were bars of soap arranged in dishes, white and smooth and smelling of flowers. The contradiction between expectation and reality was so complete it felt like madness. Major Garrett addressed them through Dr. Yamamoto. Her voice was calm and gentle. You will bathe here. You will each receive soap, shampoo, towels, and clean clothes. Take your time. The water is hot. You are safe. No one will bother you. You have privacy. The words seemed impossible. Safe. Privacy. Take your time. When had they last experienced any of those things? Slowly, hesitantly, with trembling hands, the women began to undress. They'd been taught modesty their entire lives, raised to believe exposing one's body was shameful. But months of war had stripped away many concerns. They'd lived in close quarters, shared spaces too small for privacy, learned that survival mattered more than modesty. Still, they watched the Americans nervously, waiting for the trap to spring, for mockery to begin, for guards to enter and violation to commence. But the American nurses simply handed out towels and bars of white soap, moving efficiently along the line, faces neutral and professional. Then they stepped back. "We will be outside if you need anything," Dr. Yamamoto said. "Press this button if there's an emergency." She indicated a red button on the wall. Then the Americans left, closing the door behind them with a solid click that echoed in the tiled room. The women stood in the steaming room, bars of soap in hands, hardly believing what they held. The soap was heavy, solid, substantial. Not the thin, gritty soap they'd known in Japan, soap that was more sawdust and clay than actual cleaning agent. This was real soap, made from good ingredients, designed to actually clean. Sachiko turned her bar over and over, examining it from every angle. It was perfectly white, unmarked by discoloration or impurities. The surface was smooth and slightly damp from humid air. She lifted it to her nose. Smelled lavender, a scent so clean and pure it made her eyes sting. Tears sprang unbidden. She hadn't smelled lavender since before the war, since summer days in her grandmother's garden when she was a child and the world was safe. Someone turned on a shower. The sound of water spraying from the nozzle broke the spell of stunned silence. Hot water, genuine hot water, steam rising instantly in white clouds. The woman under the spray gasped loudly, a sound halfway between sob and laugh. Then she began to cry in earnest, tears mixing with shower spray, her whole body shaking with release of months of tension and fear. Others rushed to remaining showers, hands shaking as they turned handles, watching in disbelief as clean, hot water poured down from multiple spray heads. The water pressure was strong, temperature perfect, hot enough to ease muscles and warm, chilled bodies, but not so hot as to burn. The sound of running water filled the room, mixing with sounds of weeping as grown women cried like children, overwhelmed by simple luxury of hot water. Sachiko chose a bathtub, drawn to it by memories of childhood baths, of family bathhouses, of a culture that had always valued the ritual of bathing. She turned the tap marked with an H, watched hot water rush in steaming and clear. The tub began to fill, water rising with satisfying speed. When it was halfway full, she tested it with one hand. The heat was intense, almost scalding, but perfect. She stepped in carefully, lowering herself inch by inch into heat that felt almost painful after months of cold water. The water rose around her as she sank down, enveloping her legs, her hips, her torso. She slid down until water covered her shoulders, until only her head remained above the surface. The heat penetrated deep into muscles that had been tense for months, relaxing knots she hadn't even known were there. And then she wept, openly, unable to stop, unable to control the flood of emotions that broke free. Around the room, other women experienced their own private moments of breaking. They scrubbed their skin with white soap, working up lather that was thick and creamy, watching months of grime wash away in gray streams that swirled down drains. They shampooed their hair with liquid soap from dispensers mounted on walls, working lather through tangled matted hair, washing once, twice, 3 times, working out tangles and lice eggs and accumulated filth. The water ran gray, then brown, then finally clear as they scrubbed and rinsed and scrubbed again. They soaked in tubs, letting heat penetrate muscles that had been tense for so long they'd forgotten what relaxation felt like. Some women lay back with eyes closed, floating in warmth, letting water support their weight. Others sat hunched forward, scrubbing at skin until it turned pink and raw, desperate to remove every trace of filth, every reminder of months of degradation. The transformation took over an hour. No one rushed them. No one banged on the door demanding they hurry. They were simply allowed to take their time, to wash as thoroughly as they wanted, to soak until water grew cool and had to be drained and refilled with more hot water. Fumiko washed her hair 4 times, working shampoo through tangles with patience she hadn't known she still possessed, each rinse revealing hair that was darker, cleaner, more recognizable as belonging to the person she'd been before the war. When she finally emerged from the tub, wrapped in a clean white towel that was soft and thick and warm, she caught sight of herself in a mirror. For a moment, she didn't recognize her own reflection. Her face was clean, skin pink from scrubbing. Features that had been obscured by dirt now visible again. Her hair hung wet but clean, dripping water onto shoulders. Darker than it had been in months now that dust and grease were gone. She looked human again. She looked like herself again. That realization hit harder than she'd expected. For months, she'd felt like something less than human, something dirty and defeated and disposable. Had avoided her reflection because she couldn't bear to see what she'd become. But now, clean and wrapped in a white towel, she looked like the teacher she'd been, like the mother she still was, like a person with dignity and worth. When they finally emerged from the bathing facility, skin pink and raw from scrubbing, hair wet but clean, they felt lighter, as if filth had been physical weight pressing down on them. Some felt dizzy from the heat, had to sit on benches to recover. Others felt energized, renewed, almost reborn. All of them felt the profound psychological impact of being clean. In the next room, they found clean clothes laid out in organized stacks according to size. Simple cotton dresses in muted colors of blue and gray and green. Undergarments still in packages, never worn, clean and new. Socks without holes, several pairs per person. Shoes that fit properly, intact soles, no holes. There were even sweaters for the cold weather. Soft knitted things that looked handmade. Sachiko caught sight of herself in a full-length mirror, barely recognized her own reflection. Her face was clean for the first time in months, skin pink from scrubbing, features visible again. Her hair, though, still wet and plastered to her head, looked black again, instead of the dull gray-brown it had become under layers of dust and grease. Her body was thin, too thin, ribs visible, hip bones prominent. But it was clean. She looked human. She looked like herself. That realization broke something inside her. Released emotions she'd been holding at bay for 7 months. She sat on a bench and cried. Not from pain, from relief. From the overwhelming grace of being treated as a person deserving of basic dignity. Around her, other women dressed in silence, still processing what had happened, still trying to integrate this new reality into their understanding of the world. This was not torture. This was not humiliation. This was care. The enemy had given them care. The contradiction was too large to absorb all at once, too profound to simply accept. So they moved through the motions, pulling on clean clothes, buttoning buttons, tying shoes, each small act feeling surreal and impossible. After dressing, they were led to a dining hall. The building was simple but clean, long tables arranged in rows, windows letting in afternoon light. The smell that filled the room made several women stop in their tracks. Food, real food. The aroma of cooked rice, vegetables, fish, something sweet baking. After months of watery soup and moldy rice, the smell alone was overwhelming. At the serving line, American cooks in white aprons stood ready. The women filed through hesitantly, accepting plates and utensils with trembling hands. The first woman in line received a portion of steamed white rice, clean and fluffy, not a speck of mold or insect contamination visible. Next came vegetables, carrots and green beans, cooked until tender. Then a piece of fish, grilled and still hot, a slice of bread with butter, a small portion of fruit, a cup of hot tea. By the time Sachiko reached the front of the line, her hands were shaking. She held out her plate and watched as the American cook filled it. More food than she'd seen in a single meal in over a year. The rice alone would have been treasure. Everything else seemed like fantasy. She wanted to ask if this was real, if they were truly allowed to eat all of this. But she had no words the Americans would understand. The women sat at tables in small groups, plates before them, afraid to begin. What if this was a test? What if they'd be punished for eating? What if the food was poisoned? A final cruelty dressed up as kindness, they looked at each other silently, asking the same questions. Finally, Fumiko picked up her chopsticks, took a small bite of rice, chewed slowly, testing for strange tastes. Finding none, she took another bite, then another. Around the room, others began to eat. Sachiko ate slowly at first, then faster as her body recognized real nourishment. The rice tasted clean, free of mold and insects that had contaminated their rations for months. The vegetables were cooked perfectly, still with some texture, seasoned with salt and butter. The fish flaked apart under her chopsticks, mild and fresh. She'd forgotten food could taste like this. Tears began to fall. She tried to stop them, embarrassed to cry while eating. But she couldn't help it. Around the room, others were crying too. Some ate and wept simultaneously, unable to separate relief of being fed from grief of all they'd lost. Others put down their chopsticks, overwhelmed, simply sat with faces in hands. One woman whispered, "My brother starved to death on Guadalcanal, and here I sit eating fish and rice like it's before the war." The guilt in her voice was sharp as broken glass. Sachiko had no answer. She felt the same guilt, the same confusion, the same terrible relief. That evening, they were shown to their barracks. The building was simple but well-maintained. Rows of metal frame beds covered in clean sheets and wool blankets. Each bed had a pillow. Each woman was assigned a footlocker for belongings, though most had nothing to put in them. The room was heated against October chill. Windows had glass that wasn't broken. The floor was swept clean. Sachiko sat on her assigned bed, testing the mattress. It was thin but clean. Worlds better than wooden planks or bare ground she'd slept on for months. The pillow felt impossibly soft. The blanket smelled of laundry soap. She lay back carefully, as if the bed might disappear if she moved too fast, stared at the ceiling. That night, as darkness fell and lights were dimmed, the women whispered to each other across spaces between beds. "What will they do to us tomorrow?" someone asked. No one had an answer. All they knew was that today had not been what they expected. Today they had been treated like human beings, and that was more terrifying than any torture could have been. Because torture they'd been prepared for, torture they'd been trained to expect. Torture would have confirmed everything they'd been taught about American devils. But kindness destroyed everything, forced them to question, made them doubt, broke down the walls of hatred and propaganda they'd built up since childhood. Kindness was the weapon they had no defense against. Sachiko lay in clean sheets under a warm blanket. Her body was clean, her stomach was full. She was safe and warm and treated with dignity, and she wept into her pillow. Not from pain, from the terrible realization that everything she'd been taught was a lie. The Americans weren't devils, which meant the war might have been built on lies too, which meant all the suffering, all the death, all the sacrifice might have been for nothing. That thought was more painful than any physical torture could have been. Morning came with a bell that wasn't harsh or jarring, just clear and simple, mechanical but not cruel. The women rose from beds they could hardly believe they'd slept in. Bodies rested in ways they'd almost forgotten were possible. For the first time in 7 months, Sachiko had slept through the night without waking to cold or hunger, or the sound of someone crying in the darkness. Breakfast was served at 0700. Eggs, actual eggs, not the powdered substitute she'd grown accustomed to. Toast with butter, rice porridge for those who preferred it, hot coffee or tea, fresh fruit that wasn't bruised or rotting. Once again, the quantity and quality shocked them. This wasn't punishment rations. This was food that actual people ate, the kind of meals they remembered from before the war, when Japan still had enough. After breakfast, they were assembled in the main hall. A different American officer stood before them, older, perhaps 45, with gray beginning to show at his temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. Through Dr. Yamamoto's translation, he introduced himself. "I am Captain Robert Henderson. I command this facility. You are prisoners of war under the protection of the United States Army. That means you will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. You will be fed. You will receive medical care. You will work, but the work will be reasonable and you will be compensated for it." He paused. Let that information settle. "You were told lies about Americans, lies about what we would do to capture Japanese. I want to be clear, those lies were exactly that. Lies. You will not be tortured. You will not be violated. You will not be starved. You will be treated as human beings because that is what American values demand." His voice hardened slightly. Make no mistake, Japan committed atrocities during this war. Your military tortured Allied prisoners, starved them, worked them to death. I have every reason to hate you, every justification for treating you with cruelty. He paused again. Something painful flickered across his face. My son died at Iwo Jima, 23 years old. A Japanese mortar round killed him. I received the telegram 3 months ago. The women went completely silent. Several gasped audibly. Henderson continued, his voice rougher now. So I understand if you're confused about why I'm treating you well. I understand if you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to reveal itself as manipulation. But I'm going to tell you something my son wrote to me in his last letter. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. He wrote, "Dad, if you ever have power over prisoners, remember the Geneva Convention. That's what we're fighting for. The idea that even in war, there are rules, that we can be warriors without being monsters. Show them what America actually is, not what their propaganda told them we were. That's how we really win." Henderson refolded the letter carefully, placed it back in his pocket. "I will honor my son's memory by treating you with the dignity he believed all human beings deserve. Not because you've earned it, but because it's what makes us American." He looked at each woman directly. "You will work, light duties, kitchen help, laundry, cleaning, tending gardens. You will be paid in camp script that can be used at the canteen. This is not kindness. This is procedure. This is what the Geneva Convention requires. And we follow the rules, even when our enemies did not." The assembly was dismissed. The women filed out in silence, processing what they'd just heard. An American commander who'd lost his son to Japan was choosing to honor that son's memory through mercy rather than revenge. The contradiction was almost too large to hold. Sachiko was assigned to laundry duty. She worked alongside 3 other women in a facility that had actual washing machines. Hot water poured from taps whenever needed. Soap was plentiful. The clothes came out clean and smelling fresh. It was easy work, almost boring in its simplicity. Nothing like the hard labor they'd expected. During a break, the American supervisor, Sergeant Ruth Adams, a woman in her 30s with red hair, offered them coffee. She poured from a pot into clean cups, added sugar and cream without being asked, set out a plate of cookies. The Japanese women accepted hesitantly, still waiting for the trap to spring, for kindness to reveal itself as mockery. But Ruth just smiled, said something in English they didn't understand, went back to her own work. The coffee was hot and sweet. The cookies were fresh, soft, studded with chocolate chips. Sachiko ate slowly, savoring each bite, her mind struggling to reconcile this moment with everything she'd believed about Americans. The days began to take on rhythm. Wake, eat, work, eat, rest, eat, sleep. 3 meals a day, every day, with portions that seemed generous even by pre-war standards. The work was manageable, often almost pleasant in its routine. The barracks remained clean and warm, showers were available daily, medical care was provided without question when needed. After the first week, they were allowed access to the canteen. Sachiko and several others walked there together, curious and nervous. Inside, they found shelves stocked with items that seemed impossible. Chocolate bars, cigarettes, writing paper and pens, small toiletries, even magazines and books. The prices listed in camp script were reasonable. Sachiko had earned her first week's wages. She stood before the chocolate bars for a long time, staring at bright wrappers. She hadn't tasted chocolate since 1941. Very carefully, she selected one, paid with her script. The American clerk smiled, said something friendly. Sachiko bowed reflexively, then left quickly, clutching her purchase. Back in the barracks, she unwrapped the chocolate slowly, as if it might vanish. She broke off one small square, placed it on her tongue. The sweetness exploded in her mouth, rich and dark and real. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she was a child again, receiving a special treat from her father before he died. The memory hurt almost as much as it comforted. 2 weeks after their arrival, letters began arriving from Japan, passed through censors, but otherwise intact. The words they contained were devastating. Families writing about living in ruins, eating whatever they could find, children sick from malnutrition, elderly parents growing weaker by the day. One woman received a letter saying her mother had died in the winter, too weak to survive cold and hunger. The contrast was impossible to bear. Here they sat in heated barracks, eating 3 meals a day, receiving medical care, even buying chocolate with their wages. Meanwhile, their families starved in the rubble of defeated Japan. The guilt became a physical weight. Some women stopped eating more than the minimum. Others cried through every meal. A few became angry, raging at the injustice. Sachiko's letter arrived on a cold November morning. She recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dearest Sachiko, I have terrible news to share. Our house is gone. The March firebombing destroyed our entire neighborhood. I live now in a shelter made from corrugated metal and wood scraps. Your father died in February. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to burden you with grief when you were surely suffering in American captivity. I saved rice for 6 weeks to send you this. I know the Americans must be starving you, torturing you. I know you must be cold and afraid and in pain. This rice is all I can send. Please eat it and know I love you. Please stay strong. Please survive whatever cruelty they inflict. Your loving mother who thinks of you every day and prays for your strength to endure the American devils." Sachiko held the letter, stared at the rice ball wrapped carefully in clean cloth. Mother thought she was being tortured, starved, abused. Mother had saved rice for 6 weeks, starving herself to send food to a daughter who ate 3 American meals daily. Mother called them devils, devils who gave hot water and soap, devils who provided medical care, devils who served fish and rice and fresh bread. The contradiction was too large to hold. That night in the barracks, Fumiko sat up in bed, spoke into darkness. "How many of your families think we're being tortured?" Murmurs, most hands raised in dim light. "How many of us are healthier now than when we arrived?" All hands. "How many of us eat better here than we did serving our own military?" Then slowly every hand rose. Fumiko's voice came back quiet but firm. "Then we must face the truth. We were lied to. About Americans. About the war. About everything." One woman, older and rigid in her beliefs, protested. "This is a trick. Propaganda. They want us to betray our values." Fumiko's voice came back sharp. "What values? The values that sent us to die for a lost cause. The values that let our families starve while generals ate well. What exactly are we betraying?" Another woman spoke from her bunk. "If they lied about Americans being devils, what else did they lie about?" Silence fell heavy in the darkness. Then the voices began asking questions that could have gotten them killed in Japan. Was the war necessary? Did we ever have a chance to win? Did our leaders know and send us anyway? Are Americans actually better than us? The questions multiplied, each one more dangerous than the last, each one chipping away at the foundation of everything they had been taught. Sachiko wrote in her diary by small flashlight, characters cramped and tight. "The hardest thing is not captivity. It's realizing the enemy treats us better than our own government did. That's what breaks you. Not cruelty, kindness." The next morning, Sachiko refused breakfast. She sat in the dining hall with an empty plate, staring at nothing. Ruth Adams noticed, approached with concern. "Are you ill?" she asked through Dr. Yamamoto. Sachiko shook her head, couldn't explain. How could she make them understand that eating felt like betrayal, that every bite was guilt, that she couldn't swallow food while her mother starved? By afternoon, word had reached Captain Henderson. He appeared in the barracks when Sachiko was alone, weak from not eating, lying in her bunk. Dr. Yamamoto accompanied him to translate. Sachiko scrambled to sit up, terrified. The commander never came to barracks. "Miss Yamada," Henderson said through translation, "I understand you have something that belongs to your mother." Sachiko nodded, pointed to the rice ball on the shelf above her bed. "May I see it?" Sachiko retrieved it carefully, hand shaking, gave it to Henderson. He examined it. This small ball of rice wrapped in clean cloth, symbol of a mother's love and sacrifice. "Your mother made this?" "Yes, sir." "How long did she save rice to make it?" 6 weeks, sir. The letter says 6 weeks. "And she thinks we're torturing you?" "Yes, sir. She thinks I'm starving, being beaten, suffering. Henderson sat on the bunk next to her, a shocking breach of protocol. Miss Yamada, I'm going to tell you something. My son died at Iwo Jima. He was 23 years old. A Japanese mortar round killed him instantly. Sachiko's eyes widened, tears forming. I have every reason to hate you. Every reason to make your life hell. Every reason to take that rice ball and throw it away just to hurt you. He handed the rice ball back carefully. But my son asked me to be better than that. His last letter asked me to treat prisoners with dignity, to remember the Geneva Convention, to show the world what America really stands for. His voice hardened. Your mother saved rice for 6 weeks because she loves you, because she wants you to serve him, because she wants you to eat and live and come home. And you're going to dishonor that sacrifice by starving yourself. You're going to waste her love out of guilt. Sachiko was crying now, unable to stop. No, sir. But how can I eat when she starves? By surviving, Henderson said, his voice gentler but still firm, by getting strong, by going home healthy and taking care of her, by being living proof that Americans aren't devils. He stood, returned to military bearing. Your mother will starve whether you eat or not. That's the tragedy, but you can choose to honor her sacrifice by surviving, or waste it by dying from guilt. I'm not asking you, Miss Yamada. As your commanding officer, I'm ordering you. Eat that rice ball, now, slowly, and remember that every bite is your mother's love. Every swallow is her hope that you'll survive. Every moment you live is honoring her sacrifice. He paused. And when you go home, when this war is finally over and you return to Japan, you'll be able to take care of her. Because you stayed strong, because you ate, because you lived. Don't betray her love by refusing it. That's not honor. That's waste. Sachiko unwrapped the rice ball with shaking hands. Henderson stayed, watched. She took a small bite. It tasted like home, like mother's hands, like everything lost. And she wept while eating. Henderson wept too, thinking of his son, thinking of all the mothers who sent sons to die, thinking of all the sacrifices, all the waste. Two enemies sitting on a bunk, both crying, both broken by this war in different ways. Dr. Yamamoto stood by the door, weeping silently, watching this moment of shared humanity. After Sachiko finished, she looked up at Henderson with red eyes. Thank you, sir, for making me eat, for understanding. I didn't do it for you, Miss Yamada, Henderson said, his voice rough with emotion. I did it because my son asked me to be better. You just happened to benefit. He walked to the door, paused. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you'll go home. I'm glad your mother will see you again. One family should survive this war intact. After he left, Sachiko turned to the other women who'd witnessed everything. He lost his son to us, to Japan, and he still chose mercy. Fumiko nodded slowly. That's what America is, not what they told us, what he just showed us. The following week, Henderson made an announcement. Thanksgiving was coming, an American holiday. They give thanks for blessings, share meals together. The prisoners were invited. The women were confused. Why invite prisoners to an American holiday? Was this a test? Was this mockery? In the kitchen, Sergeant Ruth Adams began teaching Japanese women to make stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. This is American tradition, Ruth explained through Dr. Yamamoto. Every year, families gather, eat together, remember what they are grateful for. Fumiko, working beside her, asked quietly, even during war, especially during war, Ruth replied, reminds us what we're fighting for. Family, home, freedom to gather and give thanks. On November 22nd, 1945, Thanksgiving Day arrived. The dining hall had been transformed. Long tables arranged family style. American flags and autumn decorations hung on walls. Place settings for staff and prisoners alike. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, green beans, rolls, pumpkin pie. More food than the prisoners had imagined possible in one meal. Americans and Japanese sat together at mixed tables. Henderson stood at the head table, raised a glass of water. On Thanksgiving, Americans give thanks for blessings. This year, I'm thankful the war is over. I'm thankful my daughter is safe. I'm thankful we live in a country where even enemies can sit at a table together in peace." He paused, emotion visible in his face. "I'm thankful my son believed in American values strongly enough to die for them. And I'm thankful to everyone here, American and Japanese, for honoring those values by choosing to see the humanity in each other." He raised his glass higher. "To peace, to dignity, to the hope that we can build a world where wars like this never happen again." Americans and Japanese raised glasses together, this simple gesture bridging an ocean of pain and loss. Sachiko tasted turkey for the first time, the meat rich and savory. Nothing like anything in Japan. Billy Chen, a young American corporal sitting nearby, asked gently. "Good," Sachiko nodded, smiling despite tears streaming down her face. When pumpkin pie was served with whipped cream, Sachiko took her first bite. Sweet, creamy, spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, a flavor she'd never experienced. "This is beautiful," she whispered, unable to find better words. Around the table, Japanese women discovering American dessert, weeping at simple sweetness. Americans watching many with tears in their own eyes, seeing enemies become people, seeing kindness defeating propaganda. Henderson observed from the end of the table, saw enemies becoming human beings, saw Americans and Japanese laughing together, passing dishes, sharing food, saw kindness doing what weapons could not. "Bobby," he thought, "I hope you can see this. I hope wherever you are, you know I'm trying. I'm trying so hard to make your death mean something." That night, Sachiko wrote in her diary, "Today I ate American Thanksgiving dinner with Americans, at the same table, as a guest, not a prisoner. Captain Henderson lost his son to us. Every American here has reason to hate us, but they chose to share their most important holiday with us. They chose to give thanks while including enemies at their table. I understand now. This is what America is, not military strength, though they have that, not industrial power, though they showed us that in San Francisco. America is the choice to be kind when hate is easier, the choice to share when exclusion is justified, the choice to see humanity when propaganda says the enemy is devil, and that choice is more powerful than any weapon, because it changes hearts, changes minds, changes understanding of the entire world. I came here expecting torture. I'm leaving with wisdom. The real American power is their values, and those values cannot be defeated by any military, because they're true. Mother was wrong. We were all wrong. The devils were not Americans. The devils were the lies we believed." December 1945 brought new opportunities. A telegram arrived from Texas. Ranches desperate for workers, men gone to war, crops rotting, cattle unattended. Could the military provide labor, even enemy labor? Henderson saw his solution to growing pressure from veterans groups who questioned why Japanese prisoners were treated so well. He called the women together, made an announcement. "Labor shortage in Texas. Ranches need workers for winter. Volunteers welcome. Light work supervised. Still prisoners, but different setting. Who wants to go?" Sachiko's hand shot up immediately. Fumiko's. 20 women total volunteered, eager for something new, eager to see more of America. 3 days later, they boarded a train heading south. The journey took 2 days, the landscape changing from California coast to desert to Texas plains. They pressed faces to windows, watching America unfold, mountains and valleys, small towns with white churches, farms with red barns, miles and miles of open land under enormous sky. This country was so vast, so rich, so untouched by war. How had Japan ever thought it could win? The ranch sat in West Texas, flat lands stretching to horizons, sky bigger than anything they'd ever seen. The ranch house was white with a wide porch, barns painted red, corrals holding horses and cattle. A windmill turned slowly in December breeze. Sergeant Jake Morrison waited for them, a man in his mid-30s with weathered face and slight limp from childhood injury. He wore jeans boots, cowboy hat, pulled low against sun. "All right, ladies," he said through Dr. Yamamoto. "Welcome to Texas. We've got horses to feed fences, to mend cattle to tend. You'll earn your keep. But first, let me show you something." He led them to the barn, opened wide doors. Inside stood rows of horses, beautiful animals with coats gleaming in light, streaming through cracks in wood. "This here's Daisy," Jake said, leading out a gentle mare with soft brown eyes. You ever ride a horse, miss? He was looking at Sachiko. She shook her head, fear and excitement warring in her chest. Well, there's a first time for everything. Here. He helped her mount, hands strong and sure, guiding her foot into stirrup, steadying her as she swung her leg over. Sachiko sat on horseback for the first time in her life. The world looked different from up here. She felt powerful. She felt free. She felt more American than she ever imagined possible. Over the following weeks, Sachiko learned to ride. Fumiko learned, and all of them learned. Cowboys teaching Japanese women to handle horses, to rope cattle, to work the land. American heartland culture shared with former enemies. The work was hard but satisfying. Physical labor under open sky. The women grew stronger, their bodies filling out, muscles developing from real work and good food. Jake watched them transform with quiet satisfaction. He'd felt shame about not serving, about his bad leg keeping him from the fight. But teaching these women, showing them what America was through hard work and fair treatment, he began to understand this was service too. December 25th arrived, Christmas Day. Jake organized a barbecue, Texas style, a pit dug in the ground the day before, mesquite wood burning down to coals, brisket rubbed with spices lowered onto the grill at dawn. The smell began before the sun rose, smoke carrying the scent of cooking meat across the ranch. Ribs, sausages, beans bubbling in cast iron pots, cornbread baking in Dutch ovens, apple pie cooling on the porch. The cowboys and Japanese women gathered around long tables set up outside under the enormous Texas sky. Christmas lights strung between posts, generator humming to power them. A radio played country music, Hank Williams singing about lost love and lonesome highways. The food was served family style. Platters passed hand to hand. Sachiko tasted brisket for the first time. The meat so tender it fell apart, smoky and rich and unlike anything she'd ever experienced. One of the younger cowboys, a boy barely 20, showed Fumiko how to two-step, the simple dance pattern, shuffling in the dust beside tables. She laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since capture. The sound was startling, bright and genuine and full of life. Other women joined, cowboys teaching them American dance, boots and bare feet moving together in the firelight. Jake approached Sachiko as she sat watching, soft smile on her face. Got something for you, he said. He held out a cowboy hat, worn leather with braided band, clearly his own personal hat. Merry Christmas, Miss Sachiko. You earned it. She took it with trembling hands, placed it on her head. It fit perfectly. Tears streamed down her face as she wore it. This symbol of American culture, this gift of inclusion. One of the cowboys had a camera, a boxy Kodak. He took a photograph that night. Sachiko, in a cowboy hat, smiling, surrounded by American cowboys and Japanese women, and the vast Texas sky behind them. That photograph would hang in her home in Japan for the rest of her life. But all things must end. In early January, word came from Henderson. Time to return to San Francisco. Repatriation being arranged. Ships would leave for Japan in February. The women gathered their few belongings, said goodbye to the horses they'd learned to love, to the cowboys who treated them with respect and kindness. Jake shook each woman's hand, his grip firm and honest. You did good work here. You made me proud to be American, because we showed you what we really are. Back in San Francisco, the facility felt different now, smaller somehow. The women had seen more of America, had experienced its diversity, its vastness, its generosity. Henderson called them together on January 10th. You're going home. Ships leaving February 15th. Japan is under American occupation. Your families need you. Time to go. The reactions were complicated. They wanted to see their families desperately, but they feared what they'd find. Destruction, starvation, death. They feared how they would explain their treatment. How could they tell starving mothers they'd eaten well? How could they describe kindness to people who'd been taught Americans were devils? Some admitted quietly, shamefully, that part of them didn't want to leave. This country had shown them something their own had not. Hope, dignity, the possibility of being more than what propaganda defined. February 14th arrived, the last night before departure. The dining hall was transformed for a farewell ceremony. American flags hung beside cherry blossom branches from the facility garden. Spring just beginning to show. Henderson stood before the assembled women and staff, his face showing every one of his 45 years, the weight of command and loss and complicated mercy. "You came here as enemies," he said. "You leave as people I've come to respect. You've shown dignity in captivity, strength in adversity, willingness to question what you were taught and see truth." He paused. "I hope you carry forward one message: that Americans are not devils, that we follow rules even when it's hard, that we treat prisoners with dignity because we value dignity, not because you earned it. When you rebuild Japan, remember this. When you tell your children about the war, tell them about this too. Tell them enemies can show mercy. Tell them propaganda lies. Tell them kindness is more powerful than hate." The Americans had prepared small packages, bars of soap wrapped in paper, chocolate, writing paper and pens, photographs of the women at the facility, during Thanksgiving, at the Texas ranch. Small things but thoughtful, personal. The women had nothing material to give in return, but Fumiko had written haiku for each staff member who'd shown them particular kindness, brush characters on cards, each one personal and specific. For Henderson, she'd written, "Winter cherry blooms, enemy shows mercy here, son's death finds meaning." He read it through tears, folded it carefully, placed it in his breast pocket next to his son's last letter. "Thank you, Miss Tanaka. I'll keep this forever." Sachiko approached Henderson, her English much improved after 5 months. "Captain Henderson," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Thank you. You show me Americans are good people. You show me your son's memory lives in how you treat enemies. You show me kindness can defeat hate." She paused, gathering courage. "I'm sorry. Sorry for your son. Sorry for war. Sorry for everything my country did to yours." Henderson looked at this small woman who'd been his enemy, who'd become something else through these months, something like a reminder that beneath uniforms and flags, people were just people. "I'm sorry too, Miss Yamada. Sorry you were lied to. Sorry you lost your fiancé. Sorry your family suffered. Sorry this war happened at all." He paused, his voice thick. "But I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you'll go home. I'm glad you'll tell others what really happened here. That's how we prevent the next war, by telling the truth." Henderson opened his arms, breaking every protocol, every rule about fraternization with prisoners. Sachiko stepped into the embrace, enemy commander and enemy prisoner. Both crying, both changed by this impossible mercy. Around the room, other embraces were happening. Ruth and Fumiko, holding each other. Billy Chen bowing to the woman he'd guarded, she bowing back. Both understanding something words couldn't capture. The next morning, February 15, 1946, the women boarded the ship that would take them home. The journey took 3 weeks, the Pacific crossing in reverse. They talked endlessly about what they would say, how they would explain, how they would make people understand that everything they'd been taught was backwards. Landing in Yokohama was surreal. The port was damaged but functioning, managed by American occupation forces, American MPS directing traffic, American flags on Japanese soil. The city beyond was a mixture of ruins and hasty reconstruction. People looked thin and tired, moving through rubble with exhausted determination. This was home, but it felt foreign, damaged beyond recognition. Sachiko made her way to Osaka, to the neighborhood where her family had lived. The house was gone, destroyed in March firebombing, but her mother was alive, living in a shelter built from salvaged materials, corrugated metal and wood planks barely standing. The reunion was overwhelming. Her mother emerged from the shelter, saw Sachiko, a moment of non-recognition. This healthy woman couldn't be her starving prisoner daughter. Then Sachiko. They held each other, weeping, words tumbling out. Her mother held her at arm's length, studying her face. Confusion clear. "You look healthy. I thought you'd be starved, beaten. I thought the Americans would torture you. I thought you'd come back broken, if you came back at all." Sachiko struggled with how to explain, how to tell the truth without causing pain. But slowly, carefully, she told it. The bathtubs with hot water, the 3 meals every day, the medical care, the work that was light and paid, the Americans who chose kindness when cruelty was easier, the captain who'd lost his son but still showed mercy. Her mother listened in silence, face unreadable. When Sachiko finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice small and wondering. "I'm glad they didn't harm you. I'm glad you survived. I was so afraid. Every night I imagined terrible things. But you're here. You're alive. You're my daughter. That's all that matters." She paused, looking at her daughter's healthy face, the weight she'd gained, the strength in her body. And perhaps we were lied to about many things. Over the following months and years, Sachiko adjusted to life in occupied Japan. She found work with the occupation forces. Her English skills valuable. She translated, assisted with reconstruction planning, helped bridge the gap between occupiers and occupied. She used her health, the strength she'd gained in American captivity, to support her mother to help rebuild. She stayed in touch with some of the women from the facility, Fumiko, Keiko, Yuki. They met occasionally, sharing tea and memories that no one else could truly understand. They'd lived through something unique, a transformation that had reshaped their understanding of the world. In 1952, Sachiko married a veteran named Hiroshi, who'd lost his leg at Burma. He too struggled with the gap between propaganda and reality, between what they'd been told and what had actually happened. They understood each other's complexity, the way the war had broken and remade them. They had two children, a daughter Yuki, born in 1953, a son Takeshi, born in 1955. Sachiko told her children about the war, but not the propaganda version. She told them about complexity, about how people on all sides had suffered, about how enemies could show mercy and allies could fail you. She told them about the bathtubs in California, about hot water and soap and the unexpected kindness of strangers, about Captain Henderson, who honored his son's memory through mercy. Her daughter asked once when she was 10 years old, "Did you hate the Americans, Mother?" Sachiko thought carefully before answering. "I was taught to hate them. From childhood, we were told Americans were barbarians, devils, monsters. When I was captured, I expected torture, violation, death. I was prepared to die hating them." She paused. "But they showed me something different. They showed me that even in war, people can choose to be decent. That small decision, to treat prisoners well, to give us soap and food and dignity, it changed my whole life. It taught me that hate is a choice, and so is kindness. Every day, every interaction we choose. The Americans at that facility chose to be kind when cruelty was easier, when hatred was justified, when revenge would have been understood. That choice, that deliberate choice to be better, was more powerful than any weapon. It broke down everything I believed. It forced me to see them as human. And if they were human, then what did that make the war? What did that make all our sacrifices?" She looked at her daughter directly. "Kindness was the weapon I had no defense against." The years passed. Sachiko's mother died in 1978, peaceful and surrounded by family. Hiroshi died in 1995 from heart disease. Japan transformed around them, rising from ruins to become an economic power, a democracy, an ally of the very nation that had defeated them. The irony was not lost on Sachiko. The enemy had become friend. The victor had helped the vanquished rebuild. American values, the ones Captain Henderson had embodied, had proven true. In October 2002, Yuki, now 49 years old, traveled to California. She wanted to see the place where her mother's transformation had begun. She found the old facility, now a museum, the California Women's Historical Site. The buildings were preserved, grounds maintained. Exhibits told the story of the 73 Japanese women, the treatment that had contradicted propaganda, the transformation through kindness. Yuki walked through slowly, seeing the bathhouse with its white tiles still gleaming, the clawfoot tubs preserved, a sign explaining, "Here 73 Japanese women prisoners experienced unexpected humanity." She saw the dining hall where Thanksgiving had been shared. She saw photographs of the women, including one of her mother, young and thin and frightened, standing with other prisoners. The museum director approached, a woman in her 60s, professional and kind. Are you here about family? Yuki nodded. My mother was a prisoner here. Sachiko Yamada. She worked in the laundry. She said a Captain Henderson showed her kindness. The director's face changed, something like wonder crossing her features. Wait here, please. She disappeared into an office, returned moments later with an elderly man. He was in his 80s, dignified, with military bearing still evident in his posture. This is Robert Henderson, she said, Captain Henderson's grandson. He approached Yuki slowly, his eyes bright with emotion. Your mother, he said, his voice rough with age and feeling. She was the one my grandfather wrote about, the one who changed his life. He showed Yuki a leather journal, worn and carefully preserved. Henderson's diary kept throughout his command of the facility, entries about Sachiko, about choosing mercy, about honoring Bobby's memory, about the rice ball incident, about Thanksgiving, about everything. The final entry was dated 1975, the year before Henderson died. Saw Sachiko's Christmas card today, photo of her family in Japan, thriving, happy, healthy. Bobby, if you can see this, I hope you know I kept my promise. I showed them what America is, and they took that knowledge home. Maybe that's how wars really end, not with treaties or bombs, but with kindness that echoes through generations, with mercy that plants seeds of peace. I miss you every day, son, but I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. That the measure of a man is not how well he fights enemies, but how well he treats them when he wins. I hope I made you proud. Yuki and Robert stood together, descendants of enemies, both crying, sharing family stories across the gap of history and loss. On March 4th, 2003, Sachiko lay in a hospital bed in Osaka, 86 years old, pneumonia settling into her lungs. Yuki sat beside her, holding her hand. Emma, Yuki's daughter, 18 years old and home from university, sat on the other side. Grandmother, Emma asked, what was the hardest part of the war? Sachiko's breath was labored, but her mind was clear. Not the captivity, she said slowly. Not the hunger. Not the fear. The hardest thing was the kindness. Her voice was barely a whisper now. Yuki and Emma leaning close to hear. Because hatred I could have endured with my beliefs intact. Cruelty I was prepared for. I expected it. I had been trained for it since childhood. But kindness, that destroyed everything. When Captain Henderson gave me dignity, when he forced me to eat my mother's rice ball, when he hugged me at the farewell, each act of kindness was a crack in the armor of hate I'd been taught to wear. It forced me to see them as human. And if they were human, then what did that make the war? What did that make all our sacrifices? What did it make the propaganda that said they were monsters? She paused, breathing with difficulty. Kindness was the weapon I had no defense against. It broke me open. It made me question everything. It forced me to rebuild my entire understanding of the world. Her eyes closed, her voice fading. And you know what the truly hard part is? I'm grateful. After everything, the war, the loss, the destruction, I'm grateful I was captured. I'm grateful I was broken by kindness, because it taught me the most important lesson of my life. She opened her eyes one last time, looking at her daughter and granddaughter, that we always have a choice, even in humanity's darkest hours, even when hatred seems easier, even when revenge seems justified. We can choose to be decent. We can choose to see the human in our enemy. We can choose kindness. That choice, that simple, difficult choice can change the world, one person at a time, one act of mercy at a time. Her breath grew shallow. Tell that story. Tell it to your children. Tell them about the bathtubs in California. Tell them about lavender soap and hot water and the unexpected humanity of former enemies. Tell them that kindness matters, that mercy matters, that choosing to be better than our worst impulses, that's what makes us human. Her voice was almost gone now. Captain Henderson chose mercy when revenge was easier, and it changed me, changed 73 women, changed how we saw the world, changed what we taught our children. That's the legacy. Not weapons, not victory, kindness, choosing to be better. She died peacefully, Yuki and Emma holding her hands, her last words about mercy and transformation echoing in the quiet hospital room. Of the 73 Japanese women who passed through that facility, 71 survived to return home. They became teachers, mothers, nurses, voices for peace. They told their children about American kindness, about hot water and lavender soap, about officers who chose mercy when revenge was justified, about a country that lived up to its values even when it was hard. The bathtubs of San Francisco were more than bathtubs. They were symbols of transformation, of propaganda meeting reality, of hate confronting kindness. And kindness won, every time, because it always does. If we're brave enough to choose it, that legacy lives on, in every choice to show mercy, in every decision to see humanity in our opponents, in every moment we choose to be better than our worst impulses. The measure of strength is not how well you destroy enemies, but how well you treat them when you win. That's the lesson Captain Henderson taught. That's the wisdom Sachiko carried home. That's the truth their descendants shared in a California museum 57 years later. The choice to be kind, the decision to show mercy, the courage to treat enemies like human beings. That's how wars truly end. That's how peace truly begins. Captain Robert Henderson died in 1976, having never stopped honoring his son's memory. Sachiko Yamada lived until 2003, telling her story to anyone who would listen. The bathtubs still stand in that museum, white tiles gleaming, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet. Sometimes it's just hot water, lavender soap, and the choice to see a human being instead of an enemy. That choice echoes forever and changes everything. The end.